this is being brought to you in a joint effort from Keys to Literacy and the PowerUp What Works folks. So the purpose of today's session is to explore what quick writes are and some of the evidence-based strategies for teaching quick writes. So I'll be focusing more on the pedagogy of what are quick writes, how do you use them, what are quick writes activities. But then we wanted to overlay that to show you how various technology tools can enhance the use of quick writes, both for teachers and for students. Just a little bit of information about, oops, this is like very slow. Okay, here we go. A little bit of introduction. I'm Joan Sedita. I am the founding partner of Keys to Literacy, which is a literacy professional development organization. We train teachers all over the country on various topics related to teaching reading and writing. Elise, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, my name is Elise Brann, and I'm the Deputy Director of a project, federally funded research project called PowerUp What Works. And we focus on helping teachers and schools link up evidence-based practices in reading, writing, and math with technology tools that can support struggling students, particularly those with disabilities, to help all students meet the Common Core standards and be college and career ready.
Excellent. So let's jump right in and talk about what is a quick write. My guess is that many of the educators tuning in on the webinar are already familiar with quick writes. They might not necessarily call them by that name. But when you have students, and this can be done in any subject, any grade, when you have students write quick writes, it enables them to process and really think critically about what they're learning, because usually the focus for a quick write is to react to something that you've just learned in class or something you've just read about. The quick writes also are an excellent tool for teachers to be able to very quickly and in an informal way assess what the kids know and understand. It's kind of like sticking a quick thermometer in the students' mouths to see, you know, where are they with their understanding of things. But in addition to using quick writes to help support content learning, they also are an excellent tool for students to practice some of the very specific writing skills and techniques that are called for in some of the new Common Core state standards. So we're going to be talking about quick writes as a tool for learning content, but for also learning to write. I do want to make a connection to the Common Core state, one of the standards, and this is writing number 10. Many of you may be familiar with it. It's sort of the catch-all for all of the writing standards. But this standard, this is the anchor standard, and it's the same as you go from kindergarten through grade 12. And this standard is about making sure that students are writing routinely, and I've underlined over extended time frames. So this is the kind of writing that involves the more formal assignments, things that take at least a whole period in class, maybe they're spread out over a week or so. But I've also underlined shorter time frames, and that's what the quick writes is all about. So these are writing tasks that kids can do certainly within a single sitting. And if students do many quick writes during the course of a week across all their different subjects, it really helps to support that need for them to write routinely to build fluency. I also wanted to add just a little note, as most of you already know, the English language arts standards are not just for ELA teachers and English teachers. As the title suggests, they are for literacy in all of the other subject areas as well. So this writing standard number 10 about writing routinely, it means not only doing that in English class, but in all the subjects. So let's go a little bit more deeper about how it helps students. It lets them generate ideas of their own related to what they're learning. This next one is really important. It helps them remember, organize, manage information. I often, when I'm doing training with teachers, make a little analogy to I use a quick write every time I go to the supermarket. And if I didn't use that quick write, you know, which is my list, I end up getting to the supermarket and I sort of forget what I need to buy. I end up going back and forth to all the different areas of the supermarket. So it really helps kids remember, organize, and manage the information that they're learning. It enables them to practice expressing their own thoughts and experiences, which is, you know, what one of the ultimate goals of writing is, to communicate with others. It allows them to react to either a topic or a question. And the quick writes can also be used for pre-writing ideas for longer writing assignments. In terms of how the quick writes help teachers, it lets teachers determine what topics of study they might need further instruction or explanation. It also allows teachers to differentiate their instruction. There's so much you can learn by looking over these quick writes that come from a wide variety of skill levels in your class. And it also points out maybe certain skill-specific writing skills that students might need practice in. So, for example, if a quick write is focusing on having students using transition words and you realize that most of the students are not using them appropriately or that they don't have very many choices, then that lets you know, I've got to really drill down on that skill a bit. I'm going to turn it over to Elise now, and she's going to address some of the challenges and also begin to get into some suggestions around technology. Elise?
Sure, thank you. So as Joan mentioned, quick writes serve a lot of benefits for both teachers and students, but there can also be some particular challenges for teachers coming up with and creating engaging quick writes for students, finding ways to differentiate the quick writes for students who are struggling writers or students with disabilities in particular, and being able to quickly and easily evaluate student responses. When you're doing multiple exit tickets, for example, you may end up with 30 or 50 student responses on pieces of paper that you need to go through and find a way to evaluate all of those, find the time. And for students, a lot of the challenges are definitely related to students who are struggling writers for whatever reason, whether it's because of physical limitations with fine motor control and the physical act of using a pen and paper or pencil and paper to write, or language problems, or just fear of writing and lack of motivation and really struggling to get their ideas down on paper.
Elise, I've gotten some, Elise, excuse me, I'm sorry, I've gotten some feedback. If you could just speak a little bit louder.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I may have moved my mouth away from the speaker a bit. So there's a couple things that it takes to support student success, and this is a big focus of the materials and resources on our PowerUp website, is, as I alluded to before, linking up evidence-based practices in writing with support from technology tools to help support those struggling students in writing. So evidence-based practices in writing focus on providing students with direct instruction on writing strategies, helping students write for a variety of purposes, and engaging students in ongoing assessment of their writing. And I'll talk more in depth later on about specific technology tools, but as a general quick overview, technology tools for quick writes can help all students, but particularly those who struggle with writing, to generate ideas, to express ideas and critical thinking, to store their writing, and this could be something like e-portfolios, and to support formative assessment. And so just as a quick example, generating could include things like brainstorming and mind mapping tools. Expressing ideas, students could use word processing tools or drafting tools that have built-in support that I'll talk about more later. Storing could be things like Google Drive and using online document storage. One thing I just mentioned to Joan, I just saw a news article yesterday that Google is now offering free unlimited storage to schools who are using Google Apps for Education. So that's a very exciting new development in terms of using online document storage for your students. And being able to conduct formative assessment could be using, again, tools like Google Drive, or using e-portfolios, or having students write short blog entries that you can then go back and be able to look through and get a holistic picture of how students are doing.
Great, thank you, Elise. So what we're going to do now is move into some more detail about instructional practices, and after I go through some of those, Elise is going to jump in with some very specific examples of technology tools. So this slide and the next one, I'll keep this one up for a few moments and then move to the next. This is a list of the kinds of activities that make up Quick Writes. I'm sure there are many more that some of you use out there. Again, you know, when we're doing training with teachers on this, one of the things I ask them to do is to take a look at this list and the one on the next slide, and to, you know, put a check mark next to which of these things do you already do on a regular basis. So, you know, take a moment as I'm talking about a few of these items and make a note to yourself. Do I already do some of these things? And if I do, you know, how often do I do them? Admit and exit tickets, I'll come back to in a moment. You know, those have been around for a long time. The other thing I want to point out as you look at this is, you know, Quick Writes don't always have to be something where students are writing out in full sentences. So making a list of items or a list of steps, filling in a graphic organizer, or completing some notes that have already been started. Those are all included under Quick Writes, even though students aren't writing out in full sentences the way they might with free writing or, let's say, paragraph summary. At the bottom of the list, sometimes having kids generate a question pushes them to do more critical thinking than actually answering the question. In fact, generating questions at different levels of thinking turns out to be one of those most effective comprehension strategies. Here's the continuation of the list. You'll see on it some very familiar things. KWL chart, that's a perfect example of a graphic organizer that gets kids writing, and often because it's guiding them to actually put some wording in certain boxes in certain places, it helps engage those students who tend to freeze up when they just look at a blank sheet of paper. I've also, I want you to take a moment and take a look partway down through this list and look at sentence combining. This webinar today is kind of too short, and the focus is more on broad Quick Writes, but I wanted to say a couple words about the importance and value of sentence combining activities and how they really can be used as short Quick Writes. Sometimes as kids are coming in the door and there's extra time, or maybe as students are finishing up and they've got some time in between activities. It's also a great homework assignment. And so very briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with sentence combining, it's a very simple task. You basically take two simple sentences, you know, maybe like Jane went to the beach and John went to the beach, and you say, can you combine those into a single sentence? So a possible answer might be Jane and John went to the beach. That's a very simple example. But, you know, eventually you can combine multiple 4 or 5 or 6 very short, simple sentences and ask students to combine them into longer, complex sentences. Some of the sentences that you run across in your content reading that you're asking kids to read in class or for homework, they're excellent sources for a sentence that's rather complex, related to the content you're teaching, and you can use that as your starting point. You break it up into several smaller sentences and have the students practice sentence combining. It's the sort of manipulation and the playing around with the words that really helps build real strong sentence skills. And this is the kind of thing that doesn't have to be done just in English language arts. So that kind of gives you some ideas of Quick Write activities. I wanted to drill down on a couple of popular ones that we use. The admit and the exit tickets, they're a great resource. You can have students write Quick Writes upon entering class, and it, you know, acts as this is what you need to do in order to enter the class to start. It could be based on homework from the night before. It could be based on bringing back background knowledge for something you're about to revisit. Its value is that it really helps to activate existing schema, and it provides a springboard for the class lesson. One of the things about having kids write admit tickets is that it really pushes them to be active. A lot of times teachers will begin the class, and it's a great teaching approach, but by summarizing what was covered the day before. But in that case, it's the teacher who's doing all of the thinking to summarize, and for many of the kids that are kind of tuning out, it's not helping. If, on the other hand, you have the students do some sort of active writing, again, it sort of pushes them to do that. Exit tickets, those are great as something the kids are doing the last couple minutes out the door. It gives them a chance to reflect on the day's lesson. It helps the teacher and brings some closure to the lesson. And this serves as a real good informal assessment. Teacher can quickly review what the kids are jotting down, what's on their minds, what they still have as questions, and as they, after they leave, get a good beat on what they need to cover the next day. Here's an example of a quick write, and down at the bottom of this slide you can see a resource site at the Keys to Literacy website where we have all kinds of free material, articles that I've authored in various journals and magazines, but also a pretty extensive set of worksheets and templates that are associated with comprehension vocabulary writing. And in that, we have a series of quick writes like these. In a moment, when I hand it over to Elise, I think she's going to be able to show you how, instead of having to download these in PDFs and print them out for kids, these are the kinds of templates that you can weave into some of the tech tools so that kids can be writing right into them using their keyboarding skills. But anyway, this is a real simple one. What we find is kids really love this one. It's called a text message quick write. And basically what you say to the students is, in a text message of blank characters or less, write, and then this is where you insert your quick write. So it could be, generate a list. It could be write a one paragraph. It could be create several questions. Here's another example of a quick write that, oh my gosh, I've been using this for years. I use it with teachers. I use it with students. It's called the the square circle triangle reflection. This, again, you can also download these worksheets. But it's very simple. After you're done with a class, or maybe there's students are finished with a reading about something, they use this as a reflection, something I learned that already squares with my beliefs or something I already knew. A question or questions that are still going around my head. And then finally, what are the three most important points that I'll remember? So Elise, I'm going to turn it over to you now. I'll come back with a little bit more about quick writes, but we thought this would be a good point for Elise to jump in and start talking about these tech tools. So Elise, it's all yours.
Thanks, Joan. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about today was using Google Forms for exit tickets. And I put a little screenshot in here of a math teacher's exit ticket that she uses. She updates these weekly on her classroom website, and students go onto the website and they submit their responses, and sometimes it's multiple choice and sometimes it's short answer, writing and explaining their thinking. And that's how she collects formative assessment feedback from her students after each class. And one of the great things about using Google Forms is, first of all, that it's free. I always like free technology. But it also allows you to instantly see student responses as you come in. Other examples of this type of thing, some teachers will use things like Twitter, playing off of what Joan just showed with, in a message of so many characters, respond to. But particularly if your school is using the Google Apps for Education, or you have younger students that may not have access to being able to text or send text messages physically, then this is a great way to collect information and get all the responses from your students as they come in, and kind of follow along with where students are struggling or where they might need a little bit of extra reteaching.
Next slide.
Yep. So that Google Docs really supports, the work you're doing as a teacher, but I also wanted to focus on some tools that can help support students, particularly those that are struggling writers. And you may or may not be familiar with Read and Write, and they also now have Read and Write for Google, which is a browser add-in that works for PCs, Macs, and Chromebooks. And again, this is free for educators. And it's a really full-featured word processing tool. It's got built-in, as you can see in my little screenshot here, built-in picture dictionaries with simple diagrams. Students can highlight words. They can hear words read aloud. They can get the definition read aloud. There's word prediction built in, note-taking supports, text-to-speech. So it provides all these what we call embedded supports for students who may be struggling writers. And if they don't need it, they don't need to use it. They can just type directly into it as they would any word processing tool. But for those students who may be really struggling to get words on a page, they can activate the word prediction and help them get started as they start to try to find the words.
Yeah, Elise, if I can just jump in for a second. You know, I look at all of this, these supports that are available now for free through Read and Write for Google, and you know, I think back to, gosh, almost 20 years ago when I first started learning about text-to-speech software and you know, scanning software that would read out loud, and slowly but surely they added some of these tools. But that software used to cost sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, and here we go. It's available, and the kids can then use it at home as well. That it's really terrific how far things have come.
A lot has changed.
Yeah. Here's your next slide.
Sure, thanks. And so carrying on with the same theme of allowing your students multiple ways to be able to present what they know or being able to do their quick writes, another tool that I quite like is VoiceThread. And there are free aspects of it, but you can also pay for classroom licenses and kind of get your own private section for your class or your school to use. But one of the things that I really like about a tool like VoiceThread is that it allows students to respond to something using text messaging. They can type it in. They can respond audibly using their voice. They can record a message. They can record video. And so it's a great way to do something like a quick exit ticket. I've also seen teachers put up a page of text. You know, one example I saw a teacher using, she used the text they were reading in Of Mice and Men, and then she had all her students do quick responses to the text. Or putting up an image and having students write creatively a sentence or two about what that image means to them. So there's a lot of different ways to use it, and it's a great tool. You can go on to the next. And another tool, and this gets back to one of the things that Joan mentioned in her list of possible quick writes, is that it doesn't always have to be, you know, complete sentences. It doesn't have to necessarily be that a student is writing a paragraph. It may be that they're using a tool like Poplet, which is a free tool for brainstorming and mind mapping, to put in information that they know about a topic. And this is another example where students can use multiple ways of representing their knowledge. They may build their quick writes using images, using text, using video, and so enabling them to get that information out of their head in a way that's maybe not so intimidating as just strictly putting pen to paper or sitting down and trying to type on a blank page.
Thanks, Elise.
Sure.
You know, something that I was thinking about as you were showing all these tools is we use the term writing, but really what we're talking about, the thinking part of all this, is composing. And I think what you were able to point out through these tools is that there are other ways for students to compose and communicate without having to pick up a pen or paper, or if they, you know, do not have good or maybe good keyboarding skills, or maybe even the fine motor in order to do that. So let me jump in with some more kind of classroom examples here. This is a list of just a handful of hundreds of quick writes that we've been collecting as we're out there training teachers, content teachers, on how to weave writing into everyday content instruction. I'm going to leave these up for a few moments, but as you know, we're going to be archiving this webinar, so you can always go back and revisit any of the items that we have on the slides. You can see some of the examples are admit and exit tickets. You know, definitions, being able to explain in your own words what some of the content terminology, or circling challenging words and then creating word maps. That's more of a graphic organizer type of quick write. One of the things that Marcy made available when you were registering, I don't know how many of you might have downloaded it, but I provided you with a takeaway activity. It's got some space for you to develop some quick write activities. My experience with teacher training and webinars and of all different types is that like the students, we all benefit as learners by having to write something down. So we don't have time during this actual webinar, but I'm going to encourage all of you, when you hang up, when it's over, to take a few moments and immediately generate 3 quick write activities that you can have your students do sometime this week or next week, and put it at the top of your lesson plan so that you actually begin to do some of this. I also wanted to share a couple of suggestions on how you can use questions in particular for quick writes. So on this slide, I've listed some sort of generic questions that, especially in these opportunistic moments where maybe you haven't planned a quick write, but you've got a few moments, you can always grab and whip out any one of these questions to get things going. And on the next slide, I'll show you some samples of questions that could be used at the end of class. So, kind of obvious, but what was the most important thing you learned from your homework assignment or the reading you had last night? What questions do you still have about your homework? What are you most interested in discussing or learning about in today's class? At the end of the class, what was the most important thing you learned today? What do you want to learn more about? What was confusing, or is there something you would like explained better? I also want to spend a few moments on this slide to reinforce that while most content teachers are going to be tempted to use quick writes to reinforce that content learning, we can use them as an opportunity to have kids practice and then to also informally assess some very specific writing skills. So on this slide, I've given you some examples of these are quick write tasks that are focused more on writing moves or the craft of writing. So for example, if your students are having difficulty writing claims for argument or opinion pieces, a great quick write would be to give them several topics that could have one side or the other, a pro or a con, and ask them to write 3 different kinds of statements for stating that same claim. Same thing with paraphrasing. That's one of those skills that most kids have difficulty with, taking notes or turning something that they're pulling from a source to write into their own research reports, paraphrasing in their own words. So that's a great quick write activity. Give the students something related to content and ask them to restate it in their own words. So, I just want to remind you to use the quick writes also to practice skills. This is one of the last slides I'm going to show, and this is what do you do with quick writes when you're finished. A lot of times teachers, especially content teachers who work with, over 100 students a day, if they're teaching, maybe 5 or 6 periods in middle or high school, will say, I can't possibly find the time to score and grade all these this writing, how am I going to do it? So one of the things I wanted to remind everybody is that, quick writes are meant to be informal. And that means that they don't always have to be graded. And if you do need to do some grading, it could be a simple check minus, check plus. You could also randomly grade just some of the papers. Say to students, I'm going to collect them, throw them in a pile, and I'm going to randomly select 5 of them, and those are the ones that I'm going to grade. Sort of keeps the kids on their feet, but it cuts down on your grading. I mean, the reason why we want to emphasize that these don't always have to be graded is that the whole idea is for kids to build fluency with their writing, is to just keep writing. And just like when we practice anything, a new sport we're learning or some new task, oftentimes the practice is where we get to make our mistakes and learn from them. So especially for those students who struggle with writing and they're nervous about writing, I think if we can set a tone so that they realize, all right, I'm not going to have every spelling error circled in red, and it's okay if I don't have good punctuation, because the purpose of this is for me to just get writing. There's a lot of value also in having kids collaborate around the quick writes, either writing them together, so maybe they can, at the brainstorming stage, before they start jotting things down, work with one another, using one another to review each other's quick writes. That can be done randomly. There's a great little activity, we call it the snowball fight, so you have students write out a quick write, crumple up, their papers and make snowballs out of them, throw them up in the air, and everybody's got to grab one, and then you call on different students to read other students' quick writes. This really taps into one of the findings about most effective writing instruction, and that is to try to find opportunities to have students collaborate around their writing as often as possible. So that's a few of the ideas for what you can do with quick writes. Obviously, use them in some way as informal assessment. Elise, we're going to kind of wrap it up with a couple of ending slides. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. So because there are so many cool technology tools and only so much time in any given webinar, we've put together a Pinterest board on quick writes with all of the resources that I mentioned today, but also many more. And you can see actually in my little screenshot here, this teacher on the far right, I put a video of the teacher I mentioned earlier who uses Google Forms as exit tickets on her website. It's a great video that shows her kids actually using the exit tickets on the iPad and how she talks a lot about how she uses them in her classroom. So I wanted to point that out because it's a really cool, very inspiring video. But there's many more resources on that page, and I'll continue to add things as I find more cool stuff.
Excellent, excellent. I already mentioned earlier in the webinar that we've got a bunch of free resources about various topics related to literacy, but this is a screenshot of the Keys to Literacy homepage, and you'll see along that gold bar where it says resources. If you click on that, that's how you can access many of the different templates and articles and teaching tips. It's also where you can access some of our older archived webinars and also our e-newsletter back issues. I'm also very pleased to announce that next week we'll be launching Literacy Lines, which is the Keys to Literacy new blog. And Elise, do you want to say something about the blog that is on PowerUp What Works?
Yes. And actually, if you click over to our slide there, you may be able to see in the lower left corner there, we have a blog called the Tech Matters blog on the PowerUp website, where we talk about linking technology tools to evidence-based practices. And Keys to Literacy has very graciously been guest bloggers for us in the past and written some really great blog posts on teaching literacy. We also have on our website instructional strategy guides in reading, writing, and math, but the three specifically that would relate to quick writes are pre-writing, drafting, and reviewing. And each one of those is comprised of multimedia materials, information on the evidence-based practices for teaching writing skills, and then linking those up with technology tools to support student writing. And so you can find all of that on our website, as well as targeted suggestions and ideas for using technology in your classroom.
Yeah, one of the things that impressed me the most when I met Elise and learned about the PowerUp What Works website is when you go to the section about English Language Arts strategy guides, each one of the topics, and a lot of them overlap with so many of the topics we do training on, but things like how to use context clues or pre-writing skills, each one of them, PowerUp not only presents the pedagogy and the connection to the Common Core and what the research says are most effective practices, but then for each one they provide all sorts of suggestions for how technology can then be used to teach that skill in a very similar way to the kinds of things that Elise shared with us today. Elise, you have this slide also?
Sure. Another free resource that we have as part of PowerUp What Works is a website called the Tech Matrix, and it's a searchable database of assistive and educational technology tools. And you can search for tools within a variety of different topics, student age ranges, and then compare them side by side like you would on, I don't know, Home Depot looking at stoves. You can compare the features of different technology tools to really identify tools that will most specifically meet the needs of the students you're working with.
I also see that you've got a section on research articles about using technology.
Yes,
Can you
we
describe
do.
some of what's there? Yeah.
Yeah, we compile scholarly research articles on theory and practice related to using technology for teaching and learning. So you
Excellent.
can search for both products and research articles within the Tech Matrix.
Terrific. So I'm going to show this slide for just a moment. The one after this also has many of the links to the sites that Elise talked about today, so we thought we'd put it all on one slide. And again, you can go back for the archive of this to access the slides. But basically, I don't know if there are any questions. I'll turn it over to Marcy in a second. But if there aren't any questions that have been typed in for the webinar, certainly if any of you want to get in touch with Elise or me about anything we've covered here, here are our direct emails. And so here's that final slide. And as Elise mentioned, all of the links can be found on that Pinterest board, which we'll be adding material to. So, Marcy, has anybody asked any questions, or are we ready
yes,
to
there
wrap?
have been a number of questions, so
Okay.
I think it's probably better if we just, handle them. We could figure out how to handle them to get the answers to the people. But there have been a lot of questions, yes.
Great. Is there maybe one that stands out that's similar among everybody, or?
Well, there's a lot of interest in getting the PowerPoint slides for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a question about the read and write for Google, whether that works on an iPad.
Mm-hmm. Elise?
It should. Let me actually Google it. I'll go to the Chrome store while you guys are chatting. I think it does, but let me just double check before I say yes for sure.
Mm-hmm. Marcy, do you want to say anything about what we're going to do for follow-up after this is over?
Yes, so we'll be following up. We'll send everybody an email and let you know once the webinar is archived, and certainly get back to answer any of your questions that people have written in. And hopefully the webinar will be available next week, if not the week after for sure.
Excellent. That's great. Elise, what do you think? Do you have an answer?
I'm not. I think there is actually a separate app by the company that makes read and write for the iPad.
Okay.
And the company is called TextHelp. And so this one is specifically read and write for Google, so it works on desktops, laptops, as well as Android devices. But if you go to texthelp.com, they're the company that makes the original software, which was called Read and Write Gold, and they have one called iReadWrite, which is the app available for the iPad. So similar tool, but that's the one specifically for the iPad.
Thanks, Elise. Okay, everybody, have a great afternoon. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.